So SharePoint has shifted some of the project template choices now into item templates to give more flexibility in projects. And some of the usual templates that have been there since Visual Studio 2010, event receiver and module, these are all for feature elements. This is new. This is the site column. Before, this had to all be done by hand. Now, when you go to create a site column, there's actually an item template for it. It'll generate the GUID for you automatically and fill out all the elements with dummy data, so that way you have the formatted exactly how you need it, so you don't need to go and find an old site column and copy the XML from it. And there's still the content type. And list is a little bit different. It used to be in Visual Studio 2010, you'd have a list definition that would give you an element manifest and a list schema for a list definition based on an existing list definition. And then there was also a list definition from content type. So you could base your list definition on an existing site content type. And then there's the list instance, where you could create a list based on a list definition feature. So now those are all kind of wrapped up into the one list item template. And then there's the empty element still, so you can do things like custom actions, that type of thing. And for workflows, there's the standard workflow item template, sequential, state machine, and then workflow custom activity is kind of interesting, because that's what, if you're building workflows in SharePoint Designer, you see lots of different activities that you can add to your workflow, and in Visual Studio. You can build and publish custom activities that other power users might be able to consume when they're using SharePoint Designer. And then there's still the standard controls. The web parts is the visual web part and the web part. And then also the user control for building ASP.NET user controls that are going to get deployed to the 15 Hive in the control templates directory. And then there is still the Silverlight web part. Silverlight web part, the visual web part, and the web part, they give you everything you need to deploy your web part to your target site web part gallery. So the element manifest and the module to make sure that it gets deployed into the gallery. And there's still the application page, which is just an ASP.NET page that's inheriting from the layouts base page class. So the application pages are the pages that you see in the underscore layouts URL. And there's still the business data connectivity model, which is named a little bit differently because it's for business connectivity services. And then there's a new item template for site definition. I don't really recommend using this one just because you can do quite a bit with feature stapling and using web templates, but they added this one. So, and traditionally people have kind of stayed away from this just because it's fairly complex. But what happens when you choose the site definition template is it just gives you the basic XML that you need to create a site definition with some dummy data in there, but most of it is just blank elements. And then the missing template, the one item template that isn't present in the SharePoint item templates, is just a basic ASP.NET page. And you can still deal with it, though. You can just develop an ASP.NET page in an ASP.NET web application and then just copy it in your build. Or you can create a web page in SharePoint Designer and copy that into your project as well. And then lastly, you could start with an application page, since that gives you you have full access to the Designer and Visual Studio, and then you can just edit manually, so it doesn't inherit from the page or the base page layouts class. And so that's typically what I do. I usually edit what the class inherits from, because a lot of times it'll it'll add namespaces and into my code behind to the application page that I don't really want to use. So I usually ended up editing that anyway. So my choice is just to use the regular application page, and I work with that inside Visual Studio. So in this demo, we're going to build upon the SharePoint project that we created in the last demo, and we're going to add a list instance to the project. So I have the SharePoint project, or the SharePoint, or the solution that we just opened in the last demo, and here's the SharePoint project that we created. And so I'm going to add a list to this project. So I'm going to go add new item. I'm going to choose the list item template. And again, this is different from before. Before you would need to do a list template and then a list instance. Now it's kind of all wrapped up in one. Visual Studio 2012, this is where, in my opinion, this is where Visual Studio 2012 really shines for SharePoint development, is in creating lists. They make it really easy. So I'm going to call this list my custom list. And here we can actually create a customizable list template and an instance of it. So you can say, okay, do we want to create a customizable list template or a list instance based on an existing list type? So in this case, we're going to use the custom list. Or we could just create a list instance based on an existing template. So here's all the existing templates. We're going to stick with the default. And then when I click Finish, we're still not done. So here's where it gets even better, is this designer here that we have. So now it's showing us the columns that we have in the list. So by default, custom list inherits from the item content type, and so it only has one field, which is, I shouldn't say it inherits, it has the item content type associated with it by default. All generic lists have that for custom lists. And that only has one field called title. So I can type a new field here, and notice how it's actually giving me, it's doing a lookup on all the site columns in my site, because we gave Visual Studio the URL to the site that we're working on. And so we can browse through here and see these are all the different site columns that we have. So I'm just gonna type in a dummy field name. I'll just call it my custom field. And we get to choose what type. We can say whether it's required. I'm going to save that. And also we have the Views tab. So now we can declaratively, in a nice way, create our view. This used to be a real pain to do before. Most of the time we had to do this in feature receivers. In code behind, we would write code that would create the view. So here we can actually rename the view if we want, or if we want to add a view, we can add a new view. And here we can add columns. So notice how by default the column that we add to the list, it automatically adds it to the all items view, which is what I want. And then if I go to list properties, I can see the title list, the URL, description. We'll just change this. We'll just add the word description to it. And then I can hide it from the browser. I can determine whether or not I want to display the list at quick launch on the quick launch button, or I'm sorry, on the quick launch left-hand navigation. So I'm going to press F5, and Visual Studio is going to automatically deploy this solution for me, and it's going to open up my site, and it's going to put me in debugging mode. This hasn't changed from Visual Studio 2010, but it's still a very nice feature. So here is my custom list that we just created with no code. Everything was declarative. And if I click here, it's going to take me to the list. And if I go to I can go to the list settings, and here's my custom list. Here's the address, the URL of it, and then here's the description that we typed in. And if I come back, actually, if I close the browser, it's going to retract that solution. So what I want to do before that, this is just something as a developer that would make your life a little bit easier, is to go ahead and delete the list if you're not going to use it. If you're doing F5, just go ahead and delete the list. That way when you stop debugging, it's retracting the solution, which means it's basically uninstalling the feature. If you didn't do that, if you left the list there and you tried to redeploy it again with F5, you would get a collision. I mean, Visual Studio would still prompt you and let you override it, but I like to just go ahead and delete it. Another way you could do it would be just to, if you needed to update this, you could just right-click and do deploy, and then that would, what you need to do is that if your feature wasn't activated, you would have to go and activate your feature. So you can see here, a feature was created automatically for me. I could rename it, and it already added the list instance and the list definition for me. So let's take a look at what was created from this designer. You can see here this is the list instance. So let me click on the elements of that so we can see the code. And let me format that. Well, let's just bring this over here. So for my list instance, here's everything that we typed in: custom list, quick launch, template type. That's for the generic list. And then description, my list instance description. And actually, I take that back. What I said about the template type, we actually created a list template here, and the type, we gave it 10,000, and so the template is named list1. So that can be changed as well. You can change that to whatever you want. So what that means is, if you create this list template, you can base other lists off of this template. So you could, let's say for example, like the contacts list. That's a template, and when you create lists off of that, you can name it whatever you want, whatever type of contacts. Could be sales contacts or prospects or something like that. So this gives you that template, builds it automatically for you. And then let's go back and so then in my list instance, I'm referencing that template. So this is an instance of template 10,000, which is this guy right here. Now the best part about what that designer just did for me is this right here. This used to be the hardest part of creating a list, was the schema of the list, and particularly the schema of the view. Now the schema, actually ever since SharePoint 2010, the schema for lists has gotten a lot better. It used to be a lot more verbose than this, but it's gotten a lot better. And you can see here, we have a content type associated with our list. And so if we go here, here's all the field refs. So we have this content type, list fields content type, and we have our title and custom field right here. So it actually has a content type here. I'm going to go back to the Solution Explorer just so you can see the layout. And then this is the view right here. All this was created for us automatically. So you can see Visual Studio 2012 makes dealing with lists a lot easier for developers, and it's nice that it's all declarative as well, because you could actually package this into a sandbox solution and deploy it no problem at all. It's not executing any code.